The Grinch story of how we got it made is a very interesting kind of adventure itself. Audrey Geisel, who was the widower of Theodore Geisel, Dr. Seuss, let each studio bid on it. So I just became one of the many people to go after the Grinch. I auditioned in La Jolla, California for Audrey Geisel and a flank of other people with my vision on the Grinch. In the end of this audition process against others, I lost the bid. And so I begged Ron, who didn't want to direct it. And I thought, well, if I can just get him to go to La Jolla, California and get him involved in it, he might just change his mind. So I sent the message to Audrey Geisel that I can get the great Ron Howard. You know, he was already an esteemed director, really in high demand. So if I could bring the additive value of Ron Howard, she'll have another meeting, which she wasn't going to do. But because it was Ron Howard, she was willing to have this one more meeting. So when Ron Howard and I went down, that of course cinched the deal, and she said, okay, I'll do it with you guys.
And from my side, I thought for Imagine and us to make a movie about the Grinch, great idea, spectacular. For me as a director, I was intimidated. It's a great book. It's also the Chuck Jones cartoon. I grew up with it. It's genius. Brian had already made a movie with Jim Carrey, Liar Liar, and I just feel like Jim was and is a comic genius. And Brian was obsessed with the idea of Jim playing the Grinch. And
that was the only way I would do it. I mean, I had very few contingencies, but I said to Audrey Geisel, who wanted Jack Nicholson, I said, Jack Nicholson is a great actor, but he doesn't have enough innocence in him to forgive him for being as mean as he is. But this guy, Jim Carrey, has it all. He has innocence like Jerry Lewis had in his day. Ron was, I guess, aligned with that idea.
Well, I loved the idea.
Yeah.
And by the time I went and helped pitch to Audrey Geisel, kind of my take on it thematically, and I kept imagining Jim Carrey. Well, Brian was right. On the drive home, I said, I don't want somebody else directing this.
I didn't know that.
I think this is gonna be great.
Rick Baker was this Oscar-winning makeup artist that was beyond belief. So he loved the idea of doing the Grinch, another big, gigantic challenge, and it really was a big challenge.
I got a call from Brian Grazer, because I'd worked with Brian on The Nutty Professor, and he said, our next movie, we're going to do How the Grinch Stole Christmas. And frankly, when they told me it was Jim Carrey, I was very excited. I thought, this is great, because Jim knows how to make faces, you know, and when you're wearing an appliance makeup, you have to exaggerate your expressions. Because yeah, I can make a face like a Grinch.
These Whos are driving me crazy. I must find a way to stop Christmas from coming.
The biggest challenge really was getting everybody on board for letting me actually make him a Grinch. Universal was paying a lot of money to Jim to play the part, and they were just saying paint him green. And I fought and I fought and I fought. I just knew that that was a mistake. I did numerous designs. I had green Jim Carrey, what I wanted him to be, in like 10 versions in between. And we set up to do tests on all of them. We finally had Jim come out, and I had an illustration in my office there where we were doing the makeup that I did of what I thought the Grinch should be. And Jim was walking around and he said, well, that's what the Grinch should look like. And I go, thank you. You know, that's what I've been saying. He goes, but that, yeah, I agree. So after a lot of finagling, everybody eventually agreed at the very last minute. That's what it should be. So I ended up doing a makeup test on myself, which I do frequently when I have an assignment, because I want to know what it's like on the other side. So if the actor complains about something, I know if it's valid or not. Jim was made up 92 days. I think that's a record. It's one thing to go through the makeup a couple times. It does get difficult day after day after day.
He was really having to do about 6 hours of makeup, where they seal his body, and it was just like he felt like he was being suffocated. I think the most painful was, he said, I don't want to use any visual effects or digital effects for my eyeballs. I'm going to have to wear contact lenses that enable my eyes to be photographed as very vivid green eyes. And I thought to myself, wow, those are like frisbees in his eyeballs. Just to sit there and do the makeup, I mean, every aspect of it was really tedious and painful, and to do it every day. Then he has to insert these contacts that were really, really disturbing him.
It was almost like sometimes people take all the scuba diving lessons and then they put on the mask and they dive and they realize they're claustrophobic and there's kind of not much you can do about it. You can have all the skill and the will and all of it, but you just kind of can't do it. He discovered that about the suit. But we'd been shooting for a while and we said, well, do we need to regroup and rethink this? And he said, no, because we worked real hard on this look. This is right, and I'm gonna do it. He did at a certain point feel like he just couldn't carry on. Brian intervened in one of the great producerial moves ever and found a therapist. I mean, you can describe it.
Well, he worked for the State Department. He was the leading expert in teaching FBI and the military how to survive torture. And I said to Jim Carrey, you can't quit. You can't give all the money back with interest, which he was willing to do. You have to meet this guy. So I paid to have this guy fly out and spent the weekend with Jim, and on Monday he said I can do it. It enabled him to dislodge the constant pain that he was feeling and sense of containment and claustrophobia that he was feeling.
My most vivid memory is one day when he was just in early stages of kind of understanding how much of this was a burden to him, toward this other objective where they really can understand the game, which is telling this story. So now Taylor's 6, and on her audition, she'd already done a couple of little things. She was good. She just got it. And she could really listen. It was very directable.
The thing I probably remember the most of the audition process was the end, the screen testing, where we started to play with looks when it was down to the very, very final girls. We did wig testing and costume testing, and we must have gone through 20 different wigs, from pink to green to yellow to orange. And then obviously Ron and everyone ended up settling with a natural blonde color with a whimsical braid and a spout. But that was really fun to immediately kind of dive into the character and start playing dress up before the role was even officially mine.
What scared me the most about this show was the size of it. I said, give us a stage at Universal as their makeup department, and we built makeup tables that were two-sided, and we had rows and rows of makeup and hair stations where I could just walk up and down the rows and go, it's too red, that's not red enough, this goes here. And it was fun to just see, 60 makeup artists working on stuff that we created in my shop and having it all come together.
The techniques of the time created some limitations. The mobility of the faces was not there in a way that they would be today. And so the Whos were a little more mask-like than any of us really wanted them to be. But the actors worked with them. They would put the makeups on, and they wouldn't necessarily be finished, but they'd have the prosthetic, and they'd spin Bill Irwin to be the father, because he was not only there to play an important supporting role, he was also there to be a kind of mentor. And he was there when we were doing our Who School, along with our stunt coordinator, Charlie Crowell. We had a lot of Cirque du Soleil artists who were adapting their act and their routine to certain behaviors to try to make Whoville atmospherically unique. And so we were developing ways for the Whos to move and comedy bits between the animated storyboard artists, our writers, our performers. It was just this ongoing process of what is Seussian and what can we physically as human beings do to help transport people into that world in a dimensionalized way that was still relatable. And it was a huge challenge because it was pre-digital. You couldn't just digitally stretch people's necks or limbs or do things to make the movements more fluid and Seussian. We had to really achieve these things. And of course, there were some limitations that were always a little frustrating for all of us, but people tried to work through those. The physical laws of Whoville needed to just be a little bit different. People working on the film treated this with a certain kind of commitment and loyalty and seriousness that really started to remind me of the way people felt about working on Apollo 13, where they so loved that story and respected that story and they wanted to get it right. In that case, it's about being historically accurate. In this case, it's about transferring that sense of what this story means to us as a culture, what the Seuss tone feels like, as much of that as we possibly could onto screen. Everybody jumped in. I don't think anybody said no to being a part of this. Again, this combination of Jim playing the Grinch and the cinematic potential, the creative potential it would mean for everybody in every department, they really rose to the occasion.
It was really the very best of Hollywood.
Yes.
I mean, the very best of what you think about Hollywood and the romance of Hollywood and how movies were made. We built Whoville on the Universal lot. We had every kind of visual and special effects going on, makeup, and inhabiting the biggest sound stages on the lot.
We had like 7 or 8 of the stages.
Yeah, it was
on
huge
Universal.
scale.
I mean, it was like you'd go there in the morning and you just,
Our studio, Universal, the chairman picked a date. Picking dates, release dates, is a big deal. You pick the date, you stake it out, and you say, that's my date. And if someone decides they're gonna have their film come out on that date, that's a fight. A real, like, alpha thing. We have a Christmas film, it has to be in Christmas time. Another studio across the street basically says, we're taking that date, we're gonna put our movie on the date. The guy that ran our studio said, no way, and he gets very ramped up about it, and I thought, wow, he's irrationally emotional. Neither Ron or I are gigantically confrontational, but I think we both said, or I know I said, why don't we just move to another date? You know, like, why do we have to fight with people? And the guy said, no, it's the only date for the movie. I said, okay. They kept their movie on that date, and we just crushed it. Our movie just blew up. It was a big discovery for kids and families and everybody, and it did better and better every day. It was a very rewarding experience. So that was very memorable to me. It was a really very well-earned victory.
I think it's the hardest movie I ever made because it was such a challenge for Jim, but it was a challenge for everyone. It was the makeup, it was the scope of it, it was the fact that every prop had to be designed. It had all the detail and specificity of an animated film, but brought to life. I felt the pressure. Timetables, we knew we had to make the Christmas of 2000. On a personal level, my mom was very ill at that time, and my dad was working on the film. We were in Universal, and my mom was at St. Joseph's Hospital, which is just a few blocks away. So, I mean, in the midst of it, after work, we were going to visit her in the hospital. And one of the things that kind of kept me going in a way was that she just loved Christmas so much. I wound up dedicating the movie to her. She passed before the movie came out. I think all of us shared this idea of, you know, if you love what this holiday can mean to people and what it represents for so many people around the world, let's get this right.